That Don't Sound Right is a podcast about talking the way we did before the internet.
When you could not prove anyone right or wrong, all the expertise was contained in the people involved in the conversation.
We hope you enjoy our conversations. And as you listen, if you find yourself silently saying, that don't sound right, send us a comment. You're one of us. So,
well, there you go.
Yeah.
Now you have three things you'll say at your new employee orientation. You don't touch thermostats, volumes, or change people. Welcome back to another episode of That Don't Sound Right, a podcast about talking. We're your co-hosts, Peter Billman.
I'm Cecil Davis.
And we're trying to have a conversation here without freezing to death. No, without using Google or fact-checking each other online. Those things can so easily kill the conversation.
It is an attempt not to freeze also, because it's 27 degrees right now.
It's 27 degrees. I made the journey over to the Camel City studio in the snow in my all-wheel drive vehicle, which was so much fun. I love driving in the snow. It doesn't bother me. It excites
me. I like driving in the snow too.
I like turning off traction control and stability control. Sometimes I get a little trouble, but I mean, that's where it gets the most fun.
Yeah. I like driving in the snow. I do not like driving in ice.
You know, today I decided to go into the office and stay there as long as I needed to for some meetings. And I made the mistake is that I left when enough snow fell on the ground to cause everyone else to drive slow and into the ditch.
Yes. That stretch that we have to drive between here and where you work is one of the oddest stretches of highway I've ever seen because of the number of wrecks that are on that stretch. So
our commute is 22 miles.
Yes.
Do you want to know how long it took me to get home? Would you like to make a wager?
Oh, it was easily an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah, you got 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It was 90 minutes.
Easily. I have been stuck in that. If it rains on that stretch of road or snows on that stretch of road, there'll be 3 wrecks.
But you know, I didn't even drive on that road. I drove here completely back roads through Kernersville and Colfax.
Oh, really?
I did all back roads.
And it still took you that long?
It still took me that long.
It's amazing.
I drove around Salem Lake.
Oh, wow.
The south side of Salem Lake, all the way around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It still took me 90 minutes.
I have driven that. I've driven that stretch in the snow many times.
But the reason we bring up the temperature and we talk a little about the weather on this episode is that we are having a conversation not that long ago, and we discovered something that didn't sound right.
About temperature.
And it's the temperature in your house.
Right.
And it's temperature in my house.
Yes.
And I'll just ask you the question. So if it's 32 degrees outside, and the inside of your house says 72, what do you set your thermostat to?
We set it under 70, like 68.
Okay, 68.
Right.
So it's 32 degrees out, 68 inside.
Yes.
According to the temperature.
Right.
But you turn around, and in about 5 days, what's good about North Carolina weather, just wait a couple of days. Well, the temperature will change.
Right.
The snow will be gone.
Yeah.
It'll be, say, 50 degrees outside.
Yes.
And the inside of your house will still read 68 degrees.
Right.
And my question to you, is it colder or warmer in your house based on the outside temperature, even though your inside thermometer reads the same?
So the reason we brought this question up is I woke up one night feeling cold. And I was like, the temperature must have dropped overnight. And I got up.
In your house?
Yeah, well, no, outside.
Outside, okay.
Yeah, because the temperature of your house would be consistent. But outside, the temperature had significantly dropped overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow or another, I could tell that it had significantly dropped overnight because I woke up cold, even though my house was the same temperature.
And that's what don't sound right.
That don't sound right.
The inside temperature thermometer is always reading how cold do you set your house at night?
It's like constant 68, I think. It might be a little cooler at night, like 65 or something.
All right, okay.
Because we sleep with a little cooler.
All right, 65, yeah. So 65 all the time inside. 22 feels outside, feels different inside your house than 40 degrees outside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you have it set at that same temperature and it was 90 degrees outside, it would feel different too. Even if your cooling system is keeping it right at 60.
Yeah, if you kept your house at 68 and it was 90 degrees outside,
right,
people would be throwing ice cubes at you.
And that doesn't sound right. Because the temperature is the same inside the house.
68 is 68.
Yeah, you would think.
You would think.
But you're right. It feels differently. Like if you look out and it's 27 degrees and your house is at 68, you're probably wrapped up in a blanket.
Right. My house is the same way.
Right.
My house is the same way. And I've been in older houses that feel the same way. I've been in newer, more sealed houses. We have older houses, probably not as sealed, not as insulated, but it's the same.
Right. You will cover up in a blanket in this temperature, but you wouldn't go outside on a 68-degree day and cover up in a blanket.
No, we'd be
in shorts.
We'd be running around with shorts. Oh, yeah. Good grief. We'd be sweating.
I wonder if it must be psychologically that that has that big of an effect on you.
Do you have a theory for why this happens?
I don't, but I've noticed it for you. I've noticed it the most when I run in the spring. If I'm running outside in the spring.
Yeah.
So you go outside in the spring, let's say it's a 55-degree day. On a 55-degree day in the spring, there will be some people that are dressed for 32-degree weather who are out walking.
Right.
I'll be dressed for 55-degree weather, so I might have on shorts but a long-sleeve running shirt.
Yeah.
And then there will be people that are running like in shorts only.
Right. Without a shirt.
Without a shirt. So on the same day, 55-degree day in the spring, there are people that are still bundled up like it's the middle of winter, and other people that have completely shed their clothes and it looks like it's the middle of summer.
Sure. But then in
the fall, I dress the same way on that type of day. But then again,
you don't change.
I don't change typically, but I notice that people are the same way because people start adding layers on the same temperature. Like it's 55 degrees, but suddenly people are bundling up.
So the people that were not bundled up in the spring are now bundled up in the fall.
Are probably a little more, have added a layer. And then the people that were bundled up in the spring are really bundled up when it starts to get cold in the fall.
I have a theory for why this occurs.
What's that?
Well, the first thing is to think about your thermometer. Your thermometer is up against the wall.
Yes.
And that wall is a solid mass.
Right.
Its temperature does not fluctuate as much as the air.
That's true.
And in our houses, which may be a little breezy in places, when it's 22 degrees out, that breeze is colder.
Sure.
Than it is when it's 40 degrees out or 58 degrees out. Those breezes feel colder.
Right. Those drafts.
That's right. So my theory is that we experience temperature different than the thermometer on the wall. We experience it with all the fluctuations.
Yeah.
Whereas the thermometer on the wall doesn't experience that.
And my thermometer's in the middle of the hallway too, where it's more constant.
Right.
But like downstairs, my basement stays a pretty constant temperature through the whole basement.
Okay.
And yet, again, I think it goes back to your theory about the drafts, but like today, the basement felt much colder than it would on the night.
But
the temperature's the same.
Temperature was the same. Okay.
And it felt much colder than it would on a summer day.
Right.
It's the same temperature.
My other thought about this is the relative humidity.
What do you mean?
When it's less humid, your body, the moisture on your skin evaporates much quicker because there's not a lot of humidity. So the humidity on your skin leaves your body quicker,
right,
dropping the temperature on your skin. As the humidity in your house rises, your perspiration doesn't evaporate as quick. So the cooling effect of your perspiration is less. And so I bet you do you have a whole house humidifier in here?
No.
I bet you the humidity in this house is around 20%.
And it definitely fluctuates between the upstairs and the downstairs.
Yes. I bet you it's only about 20%,
right,
which is super dry.
Yep.
But then as it warms up outside, the relative humidity goes up, and it also goes up in here, even though your temperature stays the same.
Do you think, so when you've been out, because Peter does a backpacking trip in the middle of winter.
Oh, yeah. It's my favorite time to go backpacking. There's no people.
Right.
There's plenty of views because all the leaves are gone.
Right.
Sometimes you get into a snow. It's beautiful. And you don't have to worry about bears because they're kind of hunkered down.
And it's also cold.
That's part of the people not being.
So there's a theory that there's this little pocket of air around your body if you can kind of keep that pocket of air undisturbed, you can kind of insulate yourself.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to that theory that, like when you're backpacking, you try to keep at night when you're in the sleeping bag, you're trying to keep a little pocket of air around your body warm in order to keep your temperature regulated?
I mean, that's the whole theory of insulation.
Right.
Right.
You're dependent on keeping this little pocket of air warm.
Right.
So you've got your sleeping bag kind of cinched down to keep this heat in.
Yeah.
You think that works?
It works like a charm.
Does it?
True story.
Okay. Because I've depended on that little pocket of air before, probably.
Oh, true story. Yeah.
Feeling like my life was in danger because of keeping myself warm.
And that's the difference between really good sleeping bags and not so good sleeping bags.
I had a not so good sleeping bag. The
really good sleeping bags have this loft. They puff up and they create actually this bigger volume of air
between
you and the cold air that maintains your temperature much easier. And so the more expensive bags have higher quality down or higher quality insulation, puffs it up, and you've got this big pocket of air. So you can stay warm in the coldest of temperatures.
And your body's doing that. The heat from your body is heating that pocket
Yes, that's
of air.
right. Mm-hmm. Right. But it's holding that pocket of air is holding it in for you.
And so
you're not losing it.
But you believe that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, from I'm in middle school, I always slept on a foam pad on the ground.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's your first problem of being cold while you're sleeping, is that the earth is this huge heat sink that wants to suck the heat out of you. And so what you do is you put this foam pad, and that creates the first.
That's a hard lesson to learn, too, if you learned it a hard way. I've known people that have learned that lesson the hard way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know people that still don't use those things.
Yeah, but that's a hard lesson to learn because it really is. The ground sucks the heat out of you.
And, even in the summertime. I mean, I sleep on one even in the summertime.
Yeah, no, I always sleep on a pad.
Because that's another thing. It keeps your temperature regulated, but it's also more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've always heard that that's what you're doing. And I tend to, in a sleeping bag at night, try to minimize my movement just so I won't have gaps and break that kind of heated pocket of air.
One, I don't mind the movement. Is what you never want to do is you never want to collapse the wall of down or insulation. You never want to collapse that down because then you lose your pocket of air, and then that's where a cold spot comes in.
And I don't sleep I can't sleep still, so I'm like tossing and turning.
I sleep on my side. So sometimes my knees are cold and my butt's cold because I sleep on my side in the fetal position.
Well, I get into trouble too because I don't like being trapped in a sleeping bag. Yeah. So usually I unzip enough around the knees, and so I have some movement around the knees, and then I create pockets, open up. I don't have loft, or I don't have a pocket of air.
But here's where you go. Here's where people go wrong. They get in their sleeping bags fully dressed.
Yes,
they get because they're the clothes that they're getting in are probably damp, right?
Yeah,
and so now you've changed where that pocket of air is. It's between you. I mean, it's basically this moist layer of fabric is now that pocket of air, and it does no good.
It doesn't insulate.
It doesn't insulate, and so you actually can't even get your body heat out to the real pocket.
That's right.
And so you're sitting in there and you're freezing to death. So I was on a backpacking trip. A bunch of us went. We woke up, snow everywhere. I mean, it was very cold that night. Yeah. We were actually in a shelter. And I remember we were all waking up, and I kind of yell out to the guys, like, "So how was your sleep? How was everything?" And they're like, "Oh, we're so cold.
Yeah.
We're so cold."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, well," "let me get dressed and I'll go build us a fire and get the hot water going."
Right.
And they were all stunned that I said I was going to get dressed.
Yeah.
Because I was just sleeping in silk boxers. And most of these guys were sleeping in their hiking clothes and their boots.
Oh, really?
They were sleeping with their boots on.
It's a hard lesson to learn.
They froze.
Yeah. So, Christy and I were discussing this weekend because we were talking about the power going out.
Yeah. Did it come out?
No. Just saying if it did.
In the event. You're prepping.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, because she was supposed to be in the mountains.
Okay.
And I was saying that you're not, even if the power goes out, you're not going to freeze to death in a house.
Right.
You can stay, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Right.
But you're not going to freeze.
Especially
if you have blankets and things like that.
And other people.
Yeah, if you got other people in blankets, then you're not going to freeze, but you're just going to be uncomfortable.
It's going to be uncomfortable. That's right.
I had one night where I thought I was going to freeze to death on a mountain.
You really?
Yeah. I had a bad sleeping bag, got below freezing, and I really thought, that.
Did you have an air foam pad to sleep on
I
top
did have a foam pad,
Okay.
bad sleeping bag, and it was a long night. It was a long night. But again, I don't think I could have frozen to death in the tent.
Yeah.
Because there's 2 people in the tent.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I don't think I was in danger of really dying, but it was cold. It was very uncomfortable.
But going back to our house, 68 doesn't feel like 68 all the time.
Yeah.
And the outside temperature has a big, big part of that.
And we're aging now, so I think it even, as you age, it gets worse.
Cecil, I've been cold all week.
Yeah.
Look at me. I still got my scarf on in your house. Don't take it personally. Although you keep your house at 68?
I think it's a 68.
I might put my jacket on.
Maybe don't. Yeah. And then if you add an office full of people in this time of year, half of the office is hot and the other half is freezing to death.
Yeah, right.
Half of the office has like heaters underneath their desk and blankets on their lap, and the other half is burning up.
We in our office, we have a whole wall of glass. And
To the outside?
To the outside. The whole wall is glass. And this was the first this week since it's been so cold. Mm. Even though I'm sure the temperature inside that building is set for 72 degrees, it did not feel like 72 degrees next to those windows. You could feel the cold bouncing off the glass and onto your body. We had to close the big, massive shades. That actually helped.
Right.
But I got thermal underwear on. That's why I wore to work today.
Well, I mean, it goes back to your theory that if you're not maintaining a constant 68 degrees or 70 degrees through the whole building. There's hot spots and there's cold spots.
Right. We were in the cold spot.
Yeah. That's why the one thing I always say is that I never touch the thermostat anymore.
No? I mean, where? Anywhere?
Anywhere.
Even in your car?
Well, yeah, I stand corrected. I will not mess with it if somebody else is in the car.
Oh, right.
I will just deal with whatever the temperature is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I haven't touched the thermostat in this house in years.
Really?
Yeah.
So who sets it?
Christy does.
Okay.
Yeah, same at work. I'll either add a layer or subtract a layer, but I will not mess with the thermostat.
Why is that?
Because you can't. It's a losing proposition, especially at work. So if you're in any way in a supervisory position and someone wants you to adjust the thermostat, you're going to make half the people happy and half the people sad.
I see. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. I was in a position one time where I was over a group of people, and the first thing I said to them was, I do not touch thermostats and I can't change personalities. And within minutes of that meeting, someone came up and said, "Hey, it's always too hot in here." I'm like, "Nope."
Did you forget what I just said?
I said, "Go back to rule number 1. I do not touch thermostats ever. I make myself comfortable to whatever the temperature is. I do not touch thermostats."
Nothing like, interpersonal dynamics, nothing about honest, constructive feedback. It's, I don't touch the thermometers. And you can't change people.
I made the mistake one time during COVID at church. We were having services outside because of COVID, and the volume was wrong on the speakers. And I remember telling myself, "Do not adjust the volume. Do not adjust the volume." I was sitting in my seat saying that
because you wanted to do it.
And then suddenly I got up and I went and adjusted the volume on the speakers so that it would be correct. And as I turned around, half of the congregation was pointing down and the other half was pointing up. And I was like, I knew I shouldn't have touched anything. It's just like a thermometer. Just leave it alone. I should not have gotten up there. So half the people were happy that I adjusted it. Half the people were unhappy that I adjusted it. And so it was a losing proposition.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Now you have three things you'll say at your new employee orientation. You don't touch thermostats, volumes, or change people.
Anything like that is subjective. It's a losing proposition. So are you going backpacking this year, Nicole?
Don't have a plan right now to do that.
This is your kind of weather, 27-degree weather.
In fact, I would probably, this is the second weekend in January. This is my typical time for going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably would have been out there right now.
But you're cold right now. I mean.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done. I think I think I don't know. But I am cold right now. I don't know.
Maybe your days of backpacking in the middle of winter.
Well, I think it's probably I'm out of shape, so my metabolism is slowed down, and I'm older, so my metabolism is slowed down, so my internal heat producing machine just isn't up to snuff anymore, and so now I'm regulated to wool sweaters and scarves inside my own house.
Well, before we wrap this up, I just want to mention that we have a mailbag episode coming up very, very soon. We've gotten through a little prep. We've gotten so much mail.
It's overflowing. I think the stitching is starting to come undone.
So we've gotten so much mail that we've actually got to do a little prep work before the episode. But it doesn't sound right, but you've come to the end of another episode of That Don't Sound Right.
Hey, before we close, we want to thank everyone for listening. If this is your first time and enjoyed the conversation, would you consider hitting that subscribe button on the platform you listen with? Also, if you're a longtime listener, give us a rating, leave us a review so others can easily find us and join the conversation.
And after last week's episode about car games you play in a car?
Did you get any?
I have heard some very interesting games that were played in cars or played in general as kids.
I've heard just a couple comments about your bottle game and how people could not get to wrap their head around two elementary school boys.
Yeah. Brian and I talked to my brother, and then we remember the game the same way.
Okay, all right.
And actually, this week, I was a passenger in a car, and I was looking out the window, and I started trying to play the game again in my mind just to see if I could do it. It's actually harder than I remember.
Well, it's probably not as quick, and so your bottle's getting smashed against everything that came by.
Yeah, and I'm not as imaginative, but the whizzing by of the side did affect me more as an adult than it did as a kid.
You got a little dizzy or a little...
Well, no, I noticed it more, but that must have trained me not to have motion sickness, because we would stare out the window.
Oh, right. You wouldn't have not done that long if you were prone to motion sickness.
All right. So That Don't Sound Right is a production of TDSR Podcast in conjunction with Camel City Studios. I'm your co-host and sound engineer, Cecil. Peter is your other host and web designer. Camille is your barista. Emily is your graphic designer. Ella does your Instagram. Both of them are back in school. Giorgio tests our merchandise. Brent is our international brand ambassador. And as always, listener number one is Scott. And so until next week, keep talking.
And stay curious.